as you've seen in the core strategy video and in the practice passages that we just did from the first test, I don't recommend reading through the passage first before you go to the questions. And let me explain a little bit more about why I recommend that. But first, even though I recommend, as you've seen, going right to the questions, doing the specific questions first, working your way through the passage, more or less paragraph by paragraph as you do the questions. Even though that's what I recommend, it's not, I would say, a requirement. So you kind of have to do a little bit of experimenting. If you try my method, which I think you should try first, and it's not clicking for you, you try it through a few tests and you feel a little bit shaky, then try, reading the passage or skimming the passage at least through first once. But I think I'm pretty confident that this approach that I'm teaching is the best. But again, you want to see what works best for you. But let me give you some reasons why, in addition to just actually working through the questions and seeing the way this works, let me give you some reasons why I think it's good not to read the passage first. And here are 5 reasons. So first, most of the questions are specific. So since most of the questions are specific, though some of them may not look specific, they end up being specific to a particular part of the passage, where if you can find the reference or find the part of the passage that's relevant, like a keyword, then you can find the answer. So since most questions are specific, we don't necessarily need to have an understanding when we do those questions of the passage as a whole, if they're just focused on a paragraph or even a line or even a word in the passage. Having a question in mind as you read keeps you focused. So one of the things that I get a lot of feedback I get from students about why they struggle with the reading section is they say it's hard for them to keep focused during the reading, right? You're reading all this stuff. You have to reread things because it goes in ear one out the other, right? The passages are boring. And if you are trying to read the passages in one big chunk before you go to the questions, I think this happens more often. Whereas if you have a question in mind, if you have something that you're looking for in the passage, you are automatically going to be more focused and more attentive because you've got a mission, you've got a goal, you've got something to do, right? You're looking for something rather than reading through the passage in a general sense. It is hard to keep your attention. So if you have that question in your mind that you're looking for, it gives you a goal, gives you something to work on and to do. Third, we want to focus on understanding parts of the passage that are relevant for answering questions. So not every part of the passage is going to have a question about it. So spending a ton of time trying to understand, let's just throw this out there, spending a lot of time trying to understand the 4th paragraph of a passage may not be the best use of your time if there are no questions that even deal with the 4th paragraph, right? Why would we want to spend time worrying about that part of the passage, right? So if you're just reading through the passage ahead of time, you might stumble and spend some time on a paragraph that may end up being irrelevant to the question. So we want to focus our time on answering questions always, not on dilly-dallying on various parts of the passage. Even if you're going to read the passage through before you go to the questions, it's good anyway to leave the general questions until the end. Why? Just because the first question of the passage is, what is the central claim of the passage, doesn't mean you have to do it right then, right? You have to break the habit. If this is a situation you find yourself in, you have to break the habit of having to do the questions in order. Even if you're going to read the questions, even if you're going to read the passage ahead of time, it still makes sense to leave the general questions until the end, do the specific ones. By the time you've done all the specific ones, you've read through the passage a bunch of times. Your first read through and reading to answer those questions. So you'll just be much better prepared to do the general questions. So reading the passage first, just so you can do the general questions first, doesn't seem like a very good idea, no matter how you slice it. Finally, trap choices might be more attractive. So one of the traps, as we're going to talk about in the next video, is they'll pull stuff from other parts of the passage that don't have anything to do with the part of the passage that you're supposed to be focusing on, right? If they are citing lines 13 to 15 in the text, and you're looking for an answer on line 27, right? And if one of the choices comes from, let's say, line 27, does that really matter? Another example would be in the dual passages. Sometimes they'll have a question about passage 1, and they'll pull information from passage 2 into one of the choices. And why does that have to do with anything, right? It's about passage 1, not about 2. But if you've read both passages, you might jumble them together. So again, trap choices, they might seem more attractive if you read through the passage in one big chunk. If instead you're focused on the cited portions of the passage, if you're focused on small chunks, you'll be less likely to be attracted to some of the trickier traps that they may lay for you based on other portions of what actually is in the passage. So those are some reasons not to read the passage ahead of time. Again, experiment, but I think you'll find in most cases following the strategy that as I teach it is going to be the best approach.